Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. We're going to be talking today about what it's like when you're walking the path towards realness or wholeness or healing or even God, if you want to use that word. Basically, when you put yourself on a healing journey and you go from a state of being unreal to real, or from fragmented to whole, or from ego to realness, what are some of the things that you can expect? What are some of the different approaches to walking this path? And how can you walk the path most effectively so that you can make sure that you walk it in a way that allows you to get where you want to be, which is to actually find a place within yourself that's real, where you feel connected to other people in the world around you, and where on a deeper level you feel connected to life. In most of the books I've written about this stuff that I use with my coaching clients and all that kind of stuff, Personal Revolutions, Shadow Life, and a new book called Trust, which is on the way. This idea of realness is really important. The words that you use don't really matter. All we're talking about with realness is just returning to our natural state, letting go of all the mental chatter and bullshit that keeps us from that, and kind of flowing with life instead of forcing it and causing all kinds of friction, frustration, and misery for ourselves. So that's what this video is about. Let's get started and see where we end up. So I read an amazing book called Knowing God by a guy called J. Packer. I think the J stands for James. I wrote it down somewhere. Yes, it does. James Packer, thank you very much for your book. In that book, he quotes another guy called Tozer, I think, who came up with a metaphor about the two different approaches for kind of getting to know God. The two most common ones that people kind of make use of in the world. And he uses the metaphor of a kind of a path where there's all these travelers walking along a path. They're on the road to find God. They're taking an active approach. They're committed to it. They know there's going to be sacrifice on the journey and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a hotel next to the path where people are kind of sat on a balcony and they're kind of looking over the top and they're watching the people walking the path. And in the metaphor, the way that he describes it, he basically says that those walking the path are obviously taking a more real approach because they're getting involved in the actual experience. Those onlookers on the balcony, really all they're doing, even though they kind of know God or they know the truth, they know of the truth, all they can really do is kind of observe it and talk about it and theorize about it and try to figure it out without actually having that inner experience. And so ultimately, as I go through this video, talking about realness and the path towards wholeness and healing, or wherever it is actually that you're trying to get to in life, it's worth knowing those two different approaches because you're either a traveler where you're actually on the path, or you're just an onlooker sat there in that hotel balcony talking about things. Maybe you read a few books, you got some concepts and all that kind of stuff. But really, just having that superficial knowledge is not going to get you anywhere. And so if you know that, then you can tweak your approach if you are an onlooker, and you can dive in and you can start walking that path, traveling towards the realest destination of them all, which is wholeness, God, truth, whatever word you want to use once again. Really, that metaphor of the travelers on the roads or the onlookers on the balcony in the hotel, it basically boils down to a distinction between conceptual knowledge and belief, or experiential knowledge and actual knowing. The reason that there are so many arguments in society about whether certain things are true or not is because anybody can use beliefs and conceptual knowledge to argue for or against absolutely anything. Like, really, you could construct any argument you want, pretty much, to prove or disprove anything that anybody else has said to you with conceptual knowledge or only at the level of beliefs. That deeper level of experiential knowledge is where things kind of get messy, because experience isn't just about linear concepts and rational thinking and all that kind of stuff. It takes it to the level of humility almost, and a kind of humbleness that means you have to accept that you're not omniscient, you're not omnipotent, so you can't explain everything. You don't need to explain everything. You're just kind of in it and you're trusting the process and going with it. That sounds crazy to anybody who's one of these onlookers and isn't actually walking the path. Because when you do start walking the path towards realness or wholeness, you find that your life is not actually just in your hands alone. It's actually in the hands of life itself. I always say that we have to get to a point where we can do our best and accept the rest, or do your best and forget the rest. That's another way people say it. But either way, you have to do what you can do that's within your control, but then you have to let go and just leave the rest to life. And it's in that messy point where you let go and leave the rest up to life that it really becomes more of an experiential thing rather than anything that you can believe yourself into. You have to know it, but you can only know it by taking that leap of faith and walking the path in the first place. So if you don't know that, you're probably going to get lost in the sense that you're not going to even get down from that balcony and start walking in the first place because you think that you have to know everything, you have to understand everything, that it's all going to be explainable, it's all going to make sense, that there's going to be a scientific study for every step that you take on the path and all this kind of stuff. But actually, that's not true because life doesn't just take place at that superficial surface level. Real life takes place at every level. And that's ultimately what I want to get you to understand from this video as we keep going through it. A good example of what I'm talking about is the idea of the planets up there in outer space. We all have heard, pretty much, that Mars is a thing. We know Mars exists. We know. But when we say that we know, like I just did, it's a kind of linguistic thing that we always do. We actually just mean that we believe. I believe Mars is out there. Like, somewhere along the line, I've seen photographs maybe, and I've picked up information, and I've read things in magazines, and I've seen videos, and I've heard Elon Musk talking about going up there or whatever it is. So I believe there is a thing called Mars, but I don't really know it. I've got no idea what it's like to walk on the surface of Mars. I don't know what it's like to breathe up there. I don't know what the sunset looks like from up there, if you can even see the sunset. I do not know Mars. And ultimately, there's a lot of us that fall into this trap where we think we're getting closer to the truth. We think we're getting closer to God or wholeness or whatever it is that you want to call it in the context of your life. But really, we're just falling into spiritual bullshittery and self-deception because all we've got is a bunch of concepts in our head. We've watched some YouTube videos. We read a lot of books about like mysticism or metaphysics or different spiritual approaches. But we haven't actually done anything with that information. We haven't used that information to hop off of that balcony and to start walking the path. We're just kind of changing the filter of concepts between ourselves and reality, between ourselves and life. And we think that's the end of the line, but it's not. If we only observe things and we take concepts on board, all we're doing really is just adding more complexity and confusion and complications to our relationship with life and with truth and with God and with wholeness and whatever word you want to use, that's we would actually find just by letting go and walking the path. And so this is really important because so many people fall into this trap. And if you want to free yourself and live a real life, then ultimately there's only one thing you can do. And it's kind of obvious. You have to hop off that balcony and start moving forward. The difference between knowing and believing, so between walking the path and just kind of looking at the path or tricking yourself into thinking you're on it, is the fruit in your life. I always say, if you put real into something, you get real out. So if you put a real commitment to walking the path and to letting go of the things that stop you walking in the way that you need to walk, given the context of your life and the readiness of your will, if you can put something real into your life, you're going to get something real out, which means you're going to get a real relationship with life. If you put something unreal in, which means it's all just conceptual stuff that isn't really linked to any of your experience, then you're going to get something unreal out. And this is why you'll see so many people who have put themselves on a spiritual journey. So they know about spirituality in the sense of they have the concepts, but they don't know it in the sense of really knowing it because they only believe. They're not actually walking the path. And you can tell these people because even though they use all the spiritual language and yada yada, their lives are full of stress. They've got nothing but friction inside themselves because of the fragmentation they're holding onto and making themselves attached to even more with all this complicated conceptual stuff that they're picking up and not acting on. They're going to be miserable. They're going to be lost. They're going to be stuck. They're not going to know where they want to be. All of those things are just symptoms of not walking the path that they're supposed to be on. Now, there's always going to be a path that's more real to you than any other path. And you don't even have to use God or anything like that when you're talking about this. Even if you take God out of the equation and you don't believe in any spiritual thing whatsoever, in your life, there is going to be a path. There's going to be something that makes more sense than anything else, given what is the most rational thing to do, what is emerging from your shadow self and all that kind of stuff, there'll be some next step that you know you need to take. The problem is, when you have all this chatter and these complicated concepts in your head that are holding you back from action, you don't walk the path that you're supposed to be walking. If you bring God back into the equation, then ultimately it's the same thing anyway. Because whether it's just a fact of life that certain things make sense, or is God's will for you and your life, there are certain things that are just inevitable about you and your situation and the path you need to be walking. And if you're only observing it and put in friction between yourself and it, then you're going to have a bad time. So a lot of the way towards healing our lives, healing ourselves, feeling good and whole and getting peace is to put real in so we get real out, which means we let go of all these complicated concepts and stuff that we're actually just using because of the ego to try and control life, so that we can let go and dive into walking the path that is going to take us where we need to be. A metaphor that I like to use when I'm talking about this with coaching clients, which is also in my new book, which is not out yet, Trust, is it's like we're walking up a mountain. So we're all on the same journey, ultimately, right? From unreal to real, from fragmentation to wholeness, from a disconnection from God and truth to a connection to God and truth. However you want to say it, we're going from one pole to the other. The way that I use the mountain metaphor is that we're at the bottom of the mountain, we're in a very fragmented state. And as we walk up the mountain to the top, to the peak, we basically let go of different layers of fragmentation and bullshit that have been holding us back from ourselves and stopped us from seeing the path because of ego, resistance, and distortion. And then we get to a place of clarity at the top because we become more whole. We let go of all the things that have stopped us from being integrated. Now, if you watched my videos before, or you know anything about my books and my coaching stuff, I always say we go through 3 steps on any transformational journey. And this is ultimately the ultimate transformational journey, from fragmentation to wholeness, because that's what we're all going through at all stages of our lives. Ultimately, we're just going deeper and deeper into it. The 3 stages are awareness, acceptance, and action. And as you walk up this mountain of the self, you go through those stages as well. As you start to climb the mountain, you start to raise awareness. Awareness means you're going to start seeing how you've been holding yourself back. You're going to start seeing what you're capable of. You're going to start testing your assumptions, because the struggle to start going up the mountain is going to take you out of your comfort zone. Basically, it's going to help you find the edge. The edge is where your ego meets reality. And when your ego meets reality, you're always going to get some new insight, which teaches you something about yourself. That is awareness. So as you start to raise this awareness, you'll start to realize that all your ideas about yourself at the bottom, the fragmented ideas, were just that. They were all of these concepts and stuff that you picked up, not just from books or whatever, just concepts in general about who you are, your beliefs, and all that kind of thing. And you're going to see that probably they were holding you back, because if you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're fragmented, that is mainly the only thing that can be holding you back, is your beliefs and the emotional stuff that led to those beliefs. So you'll start to get some awareness as you climb the mountain. As you get that awareness, you'll start to see that your ego, your identity, is actually just an illusion. It's not real. But as soon as you get that awareness, that's going to move you on to the next stage, which is acceptance. Once you become aware that the ego is just a filter between yourself and life, and between yourself and yourself, a lot of the real parts of yourself that have been hiding in the shadow territory, in the shadow self, are going to start to emerge again. And that's because the ego and the shadow are in constant conflict. I call that the shadow dance. The reason it's in conflict is because sometime in the past, you got shamed or whatever it was, so you disowned certain parts of yourself, and then you created the ego, a little box to live in, which was a version of you that was fragmented down at the bottom of the mountain, with all of those shamed parts disowned and hidden away. Once you realize that the ego is not real, those parts are going to start coming back to the surface. So as you start climbing the mountain and you raise awareness and those parts do start to emerge again, basically you're going to have to start, you have a wrestling match with them. Maybe, for example, your anger is going to come up, let's just say. Metaphorically, you're going to be wrestling with the personification of that anger until you integrate it again. Maybe a joy comes up, because the ego can be good things and bad things. They're just real, ultimately. And so maybe it's your joy. Your joy is going to come to the surface, but your ego has traditionally been, as a person who's very rigid and very strict, because your joy got shamed as a child or whatever it was. And so you're going to have to wrestle with your joy to integrate. So you climb the mountain, wrestling with all these different parts of yourself until they're integrated and you become more whole again. That's when you can finally get to the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, you're ready to take real action. Real action means that you're ready to trust. Trust because at the top, you can see all around you, and you're going to realize that it's not just about you and your ideas of yourself, but that you're connected to everybody else and everything else, actually. You're not just going to find yourself at the top of the mountain. You're going to find that truth, or you're going to find God. That's when you can really let go and just trust, because the version of you at the bottom of the mountain that was fragmented thought you had to control everything, thought you had to force everything. But as you've integrated all these parts that you wrestled with on the way up, and you've seen the truth, you realize that life is just not in your hands as an individual, but that you're interdependent with everybody else around you, and that actually there is a greater force of play, which is why you do need to do your best and forget the rest. Once you get to that point, you can really start taking real action, and that's when it comes to trust. And I just want to say a little bit more about that, because that's when things get very interesting. When I talk about trust, basically all I mean is what I said earlier. Do your best and accept the rest. Do your best means that you're not just in that balcony observing life and thinking about it and reading books and, only doing those things. Of course, reading books is a great thing to do, but you're not just filling your head with conceptual knowledge. You're going out there and you're experiencing life on your path. You're doing the things that you can do. You've climbed that mountain of the self. And so you don't have underlying emotional stuff holding you back. You don't have those little gremlins in your mind chattering away and causing you to hold back and hesitate. Instead, you're out there taking action. Action is the only thing that will change your life. So trust doesn't mean that you just don't do anything and you finger your belly button and you just, whistle and pray to the universe. You're out there taking inspired action. But because you've gone through that process of awareness, acceptance, and action, then the actions that you do take are going to be coming from a place of wholeness. The fragmented version of us at the bottom of the mountain, it takes fragmented actions. And that comes back to what I said earlier about unreal in, unreal out. If you're fragmented in yourself, then the actions that you take are going to be fragmented, and then you're going to get fragmented results. So you're just exacerbating the problem of disconnection from yourself. If you have done some of the work to grow more real, then the actions that you take are going to be real. And then it's a case of real in, real out. The things you're doing are going to allow you to get real fruit in your life, basically. The thing is, even if you do take real action, you can't control everything because you're a human being. And so even though you can do your best, eventually you are going to have to accept the rest, which means that you let go and you wait for life to fill in the blanks. Life will fill in the blanks eventually because things are always moving. That's how it goes. But the difficult thing is, for most people, is staying strong and continuing to walk that path even when it doesn't make sense. This is why it's so interesting to walk this path in the first place, because sometimes it won't make sense to you, the person walking it, and so it's going to make even less sense to the people observing you watching it. They're going to think you're a bit crazy, because in their eyes you will be, because you're not actually just acting according to linear patterns of sense and all this kind of stuff. You're constantly in this dance between yourself and life, and you're responding to things as they happen while still having a general understanding of where you're trying to go because of your vision. You know that you're trying to move towards more wholeness, that you're trying to make a deeper connection to life, that you're trying to know God, if you want to say it like that. But you don't know how that's going to happen. You just know that you're trusting that path, you're doing what you can, and you're letting go of whatever needs to be let go of that's causing you to feel fear or to hold up and hold back and hesitate or anything like that whilst you are on the path. When you're in this place of trust, doing your best and accepting the rest, so doing what you can do, letting go and not even worrying about it if you can't do anything, that's when really you're going to start to experience a side of life that nobody who is just observing from that balcony could ever really understand. Because again, it's beyond conceptual knowledge. It's an experience. You're going to experience synchronicities, for example. Now, synchronicities, when you have unusual coincidences, like way beyond the coincidence, in fact, that seem meaningful to you because of what's going on inside you, aligns with what's going on outside of you. Things like that will be a common occurrence. Things will work out like more often than not, just because you're keeping the faith and you're kind of responding to reality instead of reacting to it because of your fragmentation at the bottom of the mountain and all of the ego bullshit that comes with that. The reason that responding instead of reacting allows things to work out more is because you're not creating an extra level of conceptual complications and complexity between you and life. You're just in life, you're in the process instead of thinking about it. And I suppose really that's all I'm saying in this video. Instead of thinking about the process of life, instead of being overly focused on what you want from life, you can dive into life and you can move with it, and you're going to stand a much, much higher chance of getting where you want. Because where we all want to be is just that feeling of connection to ourselves, connection to other people, and connection to life. But you can only have that if you walk your real path and get where you need to be, which is exactly where you are, but with an awareness of it. So that was a ramble, and it may have sounded like a bunch of gobbledygook. If it did sound like gobbledygook, if you've made it this far, if you're one of those gobbledygook observers, then I'd like you to ask yourself if you really are an onlooker, or if you're actually walking the path towards realness, towards where you want to go, towards your own real life. It is possible I'm just full of shit, and I am rambling. Recently, I gave up coffee, but I feel like it's giving me more energy for some reason, which is kind of weird. But I'll make another video about that sometime. Ultimately, what I'm saying in this video is that there is a path for you that you are supposed to be walking, that you are designed to be walking right now. Or if you don't believe in design and all that stuff, there's just a path that makes the most sense to you to walk, because it's going to allow you to move towards a deeper connection to yourself, deeper connection to others, and a deeper connection to life. If you want to figure out what that looks like in your life, then either just check out my website, because there's loads of resources on there, or if you want to have a rambling conversation with me about the specifics of your life and your journey and where you're trying to get to, then you can book a call on my website, ollyanderson.co.uk/talk. That's ollyanderson.co.uk/talk. Just book a call if that's what you want to do. I won't ramble about that. But yes, hope this video made sense to those who need it. Hope those that it didn't make sense to got to think about it anyway. And I need some wise words to sum up the video. What's some wise words to say? I can't think, so I'm just not going to. If I had some coffee, I probably would have said something really wise. Memento mori, you're going to be dead one day. Peace to you.